Okay, let's talk about something called SI base units, and then we'll talk about the metric system prefixes that you need to know. So on slide number 34 of my Chapter 1 PowerPoint lecture, you'll see Table 1.2 from your textbook, and it tells you the 6 SI base units. So SI stands for System International. International system is what we would say in English, but this is in French. These are the 6 base units that we commonly use in chemistry, in physics, thermodynamics, and there are many other units that we can use, and then we would use what's called a conversion factor to go between different units. So first, let's just list the 6 SI base units. Again, this is on slide number 34, and it's table 1.2 in your textbook. So the quantity or dimension is what's first. And then the unit name, and then the unit abbreviation. Okay, so first we have mass. The unit name for the unit for mass is kilogram, and the unit abbreviation is kg. I'm also going to put another column here, which is not anywhere else, and I'm just going to call this what we will commonly use. And for us, we commonly will use a gram. And the abbreviation for gram is just G when we're talking about mass. Next is length. The standard SI unit for length is a meter. And the unit abbreviation for meter is just M. You are going to notice that there are a lot of unit abbreviations that are M, uppercase, lowercase. Mile, for example, is MI. We're going to talk a lot later about something called molarity. Molarity is capital M. Just make sure that you are using the correct units, especially somewhere like SmartWorks, because it will grade it incorrectly. So a meter is just plain M. Mass is in grams. Length is in meters. We will commonly use meters. We'll also use feet. We'll use miles. Miles is MI. We'll use lots of different units for length. And you would always be given what's called a conversion factor to go from one unit to another. And we'll talk about all of that later. Next is temperature. The unit name for the SI base unit of temperature is something called Kelvin. The abbreviation is capital K. We will commonly use degrees Celsius or degrees Fahrenheit. So many of you, if you haven't taken some science classes that talk about temperature before, you may not have even heard of a Kelvin before because we only use it in science. We typically use Celsius for medicine, and we typically use Fahrenheit in our country only when we're talking about weather. So again, we're going to talk about some conversion factors, some way to calculate, to change the temperature in Kelvin to degrees Celsius or degrees Fahrenheit. Something else to note here about Kelvin is you'll notice that it's not degrees Kelvin, it's just Kelvin. So if you're given a temperature and it says it's 350 Kelvin, you would just say 350 Kelvin, not 350 degrees Kelvin. The next quantity or dimension is time. The unit name is seconds. And the abbreviation is S. We probably won't be dealing a lot with time this quarter, but if we were, we might also use minutes, which is MIN, or hours, which is HR. Next is electric current. Uses something called an ampere or an amp, and we won't use any other anything else for electric current. We won't even talk about electric currents this quarter. The last thing is quantity of a substance. So it's an amount. And what we use in chemistry is called a mole, M-O-L-E, and the abbreviation is M-O-L. Not a great abbreviation. So the quantity of a substance, it's an amount. Commonly used would be something like a dozen. Like a dozen is 12 of something. We all know that. A mole is 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd of something. We'll talk about all of that later. You don't need to worry about that now. But it's just an amount. It's a group. It's the number of atoms in 1 mole of a substance. And that's how we talk a lot about quantities in chemistry. So again, here's an example where there's a lot of M's here. So if you're talking about a number of moles of something, make sure you either write out the whole unit name or you use the correct abbreviation MOL. Don't use M because M means meters. MOL means moles. So these are the 6 base units. We will mostly be using mass, temperature, and quantity of substances this quarter, but these are the 6 that we most commonly use. Right after that, in the slide, on slide number 35, there is a slide on the metric system. And I have put in a red box the prefixes that you need to memorize. The prefixes and what their quantity is. So you can use these metric system prefixes with any of these units, and it will, either add or subtract. It would add, increase or decrease the magnitude of what you're talking about. So the ones that you need to know are mega. And what mega is it's 1 times 10 to the 6th of something. And the next one you need to know is kilo. Kilo is 1 times 10 to the 3rd of something. So like a megagram is 1 times 10 to the 6th grams. A kilogram is 1 times 10 to the 3rd grams. The next one you need to know is a deci. So a decigram, just for example, is 1 times 10 to the negative 1 grams if we were talking about grams. You could use any of these, meters, time, moles, any of it. So this is actually 1/10 of whatever you're dealing with. And we'll talk about what all of this scientific notation means a little bit later. You need to know centi. Centi is 1 times 10 to the negative 2, or 1/100th of whatever your base unit is. And then milli is 1 times 10 to the negative 3rd, or 1/1000th. The next one you need to know is micro. Micro is 1 times 10 to the negative 6th. And then there's nano, which is 1 times 10 to the negative 9th. And then there's pico, which is 1 times 10 to the negative 12th. So these are the ones that you are responsible for memorizing. Any other ones that I give you from this chart, I would tell you what the base unit is. So let's just say we were talking about grams. So the symbol for megagram is capital M. So a megagram would be mg. A kilogram, it's lowercase k, would be kg. A decigram is D, G. Centigram is C, Cg. Milligram is M, Mg. A microgram, this is the weird one that you may not have seen before. The symbol for micro is the Greek letter. It's called mu, M-U. And it looks like a U, but it has a tail on the left-hand side too, a long tail on the left-hand side and then a short tail on the right-hand side. That's a microgram, like this. That's 1 times 10 to the negative 6 grams. Nano is N, nanogram, and then pico is P, picogram. So you're responsible for these ones. So for example, if we're doing a calculation on an exam and I say you have 392 mg, you need to know that that's a milligram. And you need to know that a milligram is 1 times 10 to the negative 3rd grams. So we're going to get into all of this later once we start doing some actual calculations. This is just the information that you're going to need to know to be able to do those calculations.